Okay, so now we are in Unit 8, and some of this is review from the videos from homework last night, but you do know that congruent, two figures are congruent if they have the exact same size and shape, meaning all of the corresponding parts are congruent. So all of the sides are congruent and all of the angles are congruent. And we already know the symbol for congruent. We know what that looks like. And you always want to list the corresponding labels in the same order. And this, again, is a little bit of review from the video. So if I have a congruent statement, now technically I don't even need the picture. I just need the congruent statement. If I have that, then as long as I look at the order that the letters are listed in, I can figure out all of the corresponding parts. So I know that because A is listed first and D is listed first, that means that angle A is congruent to angle D. Similarly, angle B and E are congruent, and angle C and angle F are congruent. I can also do the same thing figuring out congruent sides. So again, I can go in order. AB is listed first, so then DE. So segment AB is congruent to segment DE. Similarly, segment BC is congruent to segment EF. And lastly, segment CA is congruent to segment FD. Okay, and again, you don't even need a diagram for that. You just go in the same order to figure out all the corresponding parts that are congruent. Now, that's if we already know that triangles are congruent. We know all of the corresponding parts are congruent. But sometimes we will have some of the pieces and we'll want to know whether the triangles are congruent or not. So in other words, we're going to be proving that triangles are congruent. So in the homework last night, you watched a video on the first way of proving that triangles are congruent, and that's using side, side, side. So if I have two triangles and 3 pairs of sides are congruent to one another, then I know, then that's enough information for me to say that the triangles are congruent. So in other words, remember we just said in the last slide that there's 6 different pieces of information. There's 3 angles and 3 sides that are congruent if the triangles are congruent. Well, we don't want to have to know all of those 6 pieces of information every single time we want to prove triangles are congruent, and 3 pieces actually will be enough. And as long as the 3 pieces are specific pieces. So one way is if the 3 pieces are side and side and side. So that's one way to prove triangles are congruent. Another way, now this is new information, is side, then angle, then side. Now the order that we write these in, side first, then angle, then side, or SAS, it's specifically written in that order for a reason. And here's why. If I'm looking at the picture, I have a side and then an angle and then a side. The angle has to be the included angle, meaning the angle that's between the 2 sides. And of course that has to be true in both triangles. So in both triangles I have a side, the angle in between, and the side. Same thing, side, angle in between, and side. And if that's true, if you have a side, the angle in between, and the side, then we can say that the triangles are congruent. Okay, the next way of proving triangles congruent using 3 pieces of information is angle, side, angle. And again, the order matters. The angle is written first, then side, then angle, meaning, if I'm looking at my diagram, the side is in between the 2 angles that are marked congruent. And again, that has to be true in both triangles. The side is in between the 2 angles. And if those corresponding parts are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. Okay, the last way that we can prove that 2 triangles are congruent is using the angle side theorem, which says, and notice again the order matters here, We have two angles and the side. This time the side is not the side that's in between. So rather than being this side here in between the two angles, it's the one that's not included. So it's the other side. And same thing with the other triangle, two angles and the side that's not in between. If I have that, those pieces of information that I know are congruent, then I can say that the triangles are congruent. Okay, so we've covered all the different combinations except for angle, 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 and side, side angle. And the reason that I did not include those on the previous slide is because they do not work. They do not prove that the two triangles are congruent. So let's look at why. So first of all, it says why do angle, angle, angle. This one is actually angle, angle, angle. So I have an angle, congruent to an angle, 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 and angle, angle. So I have angle, angle, angle. And we can tell just by looking that those two triangles are not congruent. Why? Because clearly their sides don't have the same length. Okay, they don't look to be exactly the same or congruent. So angle, angle, angle is not enough information to prove that the triangles are congruent. Now, keep in mind, sometimes the triangles might actually be congruent, but we don't have enough information to prove that. So if all I have are three pairs of angles that are congruent to each other in two triangles, then I cannot say that the triangles are congruent. So angle, angle, angle does not work. Okay, the other option that doesn't, the other combination of three items that does not work is side, side angle. And that's the angle that's not in between two sides. So we have a side, and we have an angle. So you want to draw that in your notes. This clearly we can tell if I'm looking at triangle ABC, and I'm looking at triangle ABC. Even though segment AC is congruent to segment AC, and segment BC is congruent to segment BC, and angle B is congruent to angle B, clearly those two triangles don't look the same. Okay, so they're not congruent. So side, side angle does not prove two triangles are congruent. Again, they might be, but it's not enough information to prove that they are. So those are the two that do not work. Okay, so now we're going to try some practice problems. So each one of these you want to put in your notes, but we're going to just check both triangles and see if we have something that's going to prove that they are congruent or not. So in this top triangle, I see two sides and an angle, and the angle is in between, so that's side, angle, side. That is a way of proving triangles are congruent, but I have to check the other triangle and make sure that it's also side, angle, side. If it's something different, then the triangles are not congruent. So in this triangle, again, I have side, angle, side. So they are both side, angle, side, which means yes, the triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. And we're going to go ahead and write the congruent statement. So triangle, the first one I can put in whatever order I want. So NAM is congruent to triangle. Now I have to be careful of my order. So I started with the angle that does not have any markings. I went to the angle that has the 1 marking. So, and then I went to the side last that had the 1 marking. So I'm going to start at angle B. And then I'm going to go, let's see, what did I do? NAM. So N to the 1 marking. So B to the O, J. Okay, and we can just double check that, make sure that looks right. So that's saying that segment NM and BJ are congruent. Okay, and they look to be the same. And then that's saying segment NA and BO. NA and BO, that's looking good. That's saying angle N and angle B, N and angle B, angle A and angle O, and angle M and angle J. Yep, that's looking correct. So we have our answer. Okay, moving on to this one. So I see side, side, side. In the other triangle, side, side, side. Side, side, side does prove triangles are congruent. So yes, they are. Let's write our congruence statement. Triangle HOP is congruent to triangle, and now I just have to watch my order. So HO means I want, HOP means I want triangle SUN. HOP, SUN, yep, that looks good because of side, side, side. Next one. Take a moment, maybe pause the video, try that, and then play to check your answer. So in the left triangle, I have angle with the side in between an angle. Here I have angle with the side in between an angle. Angle, side, angle does prove that triangles are congruent. Therefore, these triangles are congruent. So we have triangle, I'll just say ABC, is congruent to triangle DEF. Okay, because of angle, side, angle. Okay, next one. So in the triangle on the left, I see angle, 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 and on the triangle on the right, angle, angle, angle. Angle, angle, angle is not a way of proving triangles are congruent. So are they congruent? Not necessarily, because angle, angle, angle. Now, when you don't prove triangles are congruent, then don't write the congruent statement. Don't write triangle whatever is congruent to triangle whatever. You can't prove that they are congruent, so don't write a congruent statement. Okay, so this one you want to copy in your notes. Now, those first few are relatively easy because we had just two separate triangles, but a lot of times you're going to have a diagram where the two triangles are connected or share something, like sometimes they'll share a side. In this case, they share an angle. Well, their two angles are connected, I should say. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look to see what we have and see if there's any other information that we know. So I'm looking at the triangle on the left and I see side and side, and the triangle on the right also has side and side. But we need more than just two pieces of information. So there has to be something else. So I'm also looking to see, well, what do I know from previously in the course? And we know that vertical angles are congruent. So even though it's not marked, I can mark that those two angles are congruent to one another. And I'm going to write that. So angle DFE is congruent to angle HFG. Okay, and I'm supposed to explain, give a justification. So my reason is vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so now that I have that piece of information marked, now I'm going to go to my triangles and I see a side, and the angle is in between. So that's side, angle, side. I have to check this one as well. A side, the angle in between, side, angle, side. So yes, the triangles are congruent. My reasoning is side, angle, side. And I'm going to mark that triangle, let's say FED. Whoops. That's an E. FED is congruent to triangle. So F then E, looks like I started with the side that's a 2. So F then E then D means F then H then G. And check that. Angle F is congruent to itself. Yep. Angle E is congruent to angle H. D and G are congruent. And segment FE is congruent to segment FH. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so we have it in the correct order. And my reason for saying that, again, is side, angle, side. Okay, so that takes care of our lesson for today on proving triangles are congruent. I'd like you to try these problems. Those are what we worked on in class. So work on the odds on pages 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. And we did go over some of those in class, but we didn't quite go through all of them. So the rest of that will be part of your homework assignment. So that was added to the homework. So complete those for Monday.